Right, well, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking some time out of your Saturdays to come and join us for this talk today. Hopefully, it will be quite useful for some of you, especially if you're particularly new to flowers or not quite sure how to prepare for a flower. I'm going to be joined today by Mairi and Calum, who are our brilliant Ceoltóir in Britain youth officers. I think they might have some more talks and workshops like this planned for the rest of the year as well, or some other ideas coming up for 2024, so keep your eyes peeled for information on some of those upcoming projects. And we've just also heard from Elska Simpson. She's our community project officer, and Erin Brown's here today as well to help us out. She's our new outreach and development officer, recently appointed, so congratulations to her. Hopefully today we'll keep this quite informal, and it can be a bit of a chat and a discussion about things that you're interested in or questions that you may have, and hopefully we'll be able to give you some insight, and particularly if it's your first time ever going to the Fleadh, what kind of things to look out for, or how to prepare for competitions, and what kind of the whole weekend's about. All right. So just as a little disclaimer, all of the advice today isn't like official advice from the Fleadh or from committees. It's not something we've been asked to put out. Just through discussions, we thought it might be quite useful for some of our branch members across Britain to kind of hear from some of our personal experiences of Fleadhs. Some of us have competed down the years, and some of us have had a bit of experience adjudicating. So some of the information we give you today might be helpful for your own Fleadh experience, but just to note that it's nothing official from the Fleadh itself, and it's just advice and suggestions. It's not hard and fast rules as such. So take it as you want. So a bit of the generalised structure for today's talk, but please feel free to chip in whenever you want with questions. We're going to go through a little bit about what is the Fleadh for those who've never been at all, a little touch on what the Fleadh dates are for this year, and a bit on how to enter for that. And we'll talk through the competition requirements, kind of what tunes you're expected to play or what types of tunes you might want to play, and how to prepare those tunes to a Fleadh standard. We're going to split that into kind of the fast tunes, which we'd call the dance tunes. So that would be things like your reels and jigs, and also slow airs, which obviously have a lot of different techniques, and you'd kind of source those tunes from different places. And we'll also have a little bit of information about the singing competitions for those interested in that. Kind of the Fleadh etiquettes for those, again, who've never experienced the Fleadh competitions themselves, and what to expect on the day. Questions can be asked at the end, but feel free to pop them in the chat throughout, and one of us will do our best to answer those for you. So firstly, for those completely new, as I keep saying, to the Fleadh, which is kind of the purpose of the talk, so some of this might be a little bit like already known to a lot of you, but basically the Fleadh, the word Fleadh comes from the word for banquet or festival, and Ceol comes from the word for music in the Irish language. So essentially it's meant to be a festival of music celebrating Irish tradition, Irish culture, and over the years it's got bigger and bigger as a competition and as a weekend or a week-long celebration of music. First started in Mullingar in 1951, and now we have Fleadhs in multiple countries all across the world, and people entering from a wide range of places across Europe, America, Australia. So it's now become a huge event every summer. But I guess for us here in Britain, we might be wondering, how do we get involved in that process? You can obviously just attend and enjoy the sessions and kind of the street music that goes on. But if you want to get involved in the competitions, kind of what does that entail? So here in Britain, we have 3 different stages. First of all, you have the regional Fleadhs, which are held at local levels, hosted by your different Ceoltóir branches. The winners at that level then qualify onto the All Britain, and they compete against the winners of all the different regions. And then those who win at that level get to go on to the All Ireland Fleadh in August. So these are the dates for this year, but this is kind of like a roadmap, a timeline of what to expect of all the different regional Fleadhs and the All Britain Fleadh at the end. And we are focusing mostly on the regional and All Britain Fleadh today. There's not much different with the All Ireland. So if you do have questions about that, you can ask, but as this is a Ceoltóir in Britain talk, we've kind of kept it to these 2 stages of competition. The regional Fleadhs typically occur between March and May each year, and then everyone heads to the All Britain in June, and this year that's being held by the Northern region in Merseyside, so 29th to 30th of June. And it's good to kind of get an idea early of when your flahs are taking place. As you can see, they're quite spread out. You've got the London Fleadh in March, and you've got the Northern Regions Fleadh in May, and the entry dates and all that will be very different for each Fleadh, and you don't want to miss your deadline, so do keep an eye on those. When doing research prior to this talk, we were all quite surprised about the wide range of competitions that there are available for the Fleadh, so there's something really for everyone. And as you can see, there's over 50 competitions. The competitions themselves are split predominantly by age group. So you have your under 12, 12 to 15, 15 to 18, and your senior categories. In terms of how those ages fall, so anyone whose 12th birthday or an earlier birthday occurs on any date in the year of the Fleadh falls into the under 12 category. That sounds quite confusing, so to kind of simplify that, if you turn 12 on the 31st of December, so the end of the year, you would actually be in the under 15 category. If you happen to turn 12 a day later, so on the 1st of January, you get to be in the under 12 category. So the different age categories are important because if you're not aware of them, there are different competition requirements for each of those stages. So it's important to know early which category you fall into so that you're prepared for the Fleadh. You don't want to turn up expecting to be in the under 12 category and being under 15 and needing 3 tunes instead of 2. And like I've said, there's a whole range of instruments that are involved in the Fleadh competitions, but as well as that you have band competitions, group competitions, duets, trios, singing, storytelling and dancing, as well as singing. So there's quite a lot to choose from and something to suit everyone and all the talents that you might have in your different branches. In terms of the competition requirements, so in the under 12 and 12 to 15 categories, you will be expected to play 2 tunes in total. And you can play any combination of tunes from this list here, which is listed in the Fleadh rules. What I would say is that for most people starting out in under 12 or in 12 to 15, the most common types of tune that you would be, that would be heard being played in the Fleadh would be things like jigs, maybe a reel, sometimes a polka or a hornpipe. There are quite a few different tune choices listed here, but those would be the most common choices. So you can by all means play a clan march and a planksty or a fling. But if you kind of were wondering what's kind of most commonly played or most heard, it would be reels, jigs, polkas, hornpipes, more from that first half of the list. And in particular, if you're new to the Fleadh, playing something like a jig that has maybe what would be suggested as a simpler rhythm would be a good idea, or a polka as well, because you can play those quite slow and steady and not let nerves take over and let that affect you on the day. I also think it's good to play 2 tunes that you're familiar with and confident playing. A lot of the time on the day of the actual competition, it can be quite stressful and nerves might take over and can cause mind blanks, which I've experienced myself. So playing a tune that you're confident with the rhythm and confident with the melody of can be really, really helpful and help to minimize those nerves and those mind blanks on the day. Also, of those 2 tunes, just as a suggestion, but again, it's not a rule, it's often best to play your strongest tune second, probably to leave like a good mark on the adjudicator before the next competitor comes up to play. Some people prefer to play their more complicated tune first, which sometimes is your best tune, and that's, say, particularly if you suffer with nerves, and that's absolutely fine. But again, I would say generally most people would finish with their best tune, and that's often something like a reel. This list also says that you can play slow airs in the under 12, 12 to 15 competitions, and this is mostly talking about dance tunes. I would probably not play an air in your dance tune competition, particularly if your instrument already has a separate competition for slow airs, because there are marks in your dance tune competitions for things like rhythm, ornamentation, variation, and it's really hard to introduce those to slow airs. You don't really want to be changing slow airs too much, as we'll touch on later. They kind of come from songs, and there's less room to play around with them. So I would probably suggest avoiding a slow air in the dance tune competition and choosing 2 of the other types of tune. So it's good to note that as you go up in age group, you also go up in the amount of tunes that you have to play. So when you climb up to 15 to 18, you're now expected to play a total of 3 tunes. And again, you have a bit more freedom this time to choose tunes with different varieties of rhythms and show off different styles or different ways of playing. Just again, from experience, most commonly in the competitions that I've been to or listened to or had experience listening to friends in, the kind of tunes that are most common from this list would be reels, jigs, and then your third tune would often be something like a hornpipe or a barn dance or a march or a polka. And all these tunes have a variety of different rhythms. It's really important that you've listened to those kind of tunes before. We all get exposed to reels and jigs quite early in sessions or at music lessons, but maybe not so much hornpipes or barn dances, which are actually different from each other, and marches and polkas, which you may mainly hear in different parts of the country, particularly in, say, Munster in Ireland, you'd hear more polkas and slides. But I do think whatever tune you decide as your third, it's good to have listened to a variety of different people playing that kind of tune, so that you're definitely playing that kind of rhythm and doing it justice. If you do have more experience with tunes like polkas and slides, again, it's not hard and fast rule that you have to include a jig and a reel. But just for those of you wondering, in most competitions in Britain and in Ireland, a jig and a reel are kind of standard tune choices. So you can play around with your third choice though. And then at senior level, you have 4 tunes in total. So you're going up as you get older and expected to play a little bit more. Again, this is the same list of tune categories that you can choose from. There are certain instruments which we've listed here that do have a separate slow air competition. If you're in a senior competition that doesn't fall into one of these categories, then by all means you can play an air as your additional tune once you're at senior level, and that's commonly done on things like the concertina or the button accordion. The flute, fiddle, whistle, pipes and harp have to select a slow air as their 4th tune, and they also have a separate air competition, so it gets a little bit complicated there. But like I'm saying, these are just kind of suggestions from experience, but I would say in most categories in underages, an air wouldn't be used as your choice of tune if you only have 2 or 3 to pick from, just because it's more difficult to variate and to show off your skills with. But it's essential at senior level for flute, fiddle, tin whistle, uilleann pipes and harp. So do be aware of that if you're entering in any of those categories. Does anyone have any questions or anything so far?
Yeah, Ola. Is it possible to play some tunes on a flute and something else on a whistle, or is that cheating? I've never been.
You mean within the same competition?
Yeah.
So the competitions, as well as being split by age, are split by instrument. So you couldn't swap instruments in that one competition. So there would be a separate one for the whistle and separate for the flute.
Perfect.
So yeah, and you would need, if you were entering the flute and whistle, you can play the same tunes on both. That's absolutely fine. And often it's different adjudicators, so they might not even know you've done that. But yeah, you'd need to separate the 2 instruments. It would be a nice idea though if you could do that.
Awesome, thank you.
That's all right. So just a few, again, tips and tricks. These are just things, again, from experience. And Calum and Mairi and Erin, if you've had any other things that you've been... Oh, hang on, there's someone else asking a question. Spencer.
Yeah, just for myself. So I'm not sure if this is going to get covered later, but I was thinking of entering the accompaniment category. Do I need to take a musician with me, or would I take? Can I take pre-recorded music? How does accompaniment work?
I've never heard of anyone bringing pre-recorded music. The rules say you can have 1 musician with you or 2, I think is the maximum. Okay. And it's normally live musicians. I don't think there is. I actually don't think you can bring pre-recorded music. Calum, would you happen to know about that for sure?
Yeah, it needs to be a live musician, or at least as far as I know. and also you'd prefer to have a live musician, so stuff like if you're having to stop or anything like that, that can all be just easily done with a live player. So, yeah.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
I'm
You.
pretty sure. Oh, sorry, Spencer.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you. I just didn't know what you needed to bring.
Yeah.
I would prefer musicians, so that's fine. Thank you.
From what the rules seem to have said when we've looked through, one musician or maximum two, and often people do bring two, depending on kind of the instrument they're playing. So if they're quite loud accompanists, it might be better to have two, because I do think you get marks on how well you accompany the tune, and you don't want to be overpowering the melody. So say like if you were playing a drum, they often in the drum competition would have two, so that they're not overwhelming the melody line. So it kind of depends what you're playing. If it's guitar or piano, you'd probably be fine with just one.
Yeah, okay.
It can be hard. Yeah, it's
willing musicians now then.
yeah. I remember being at my regional Fleadh and just on the day playing for people, so they wouldn't have even had a chance to play with me before. So it is hard. They'd be, I guess, just practicing along to tunes they like at home, and they're hoping that people, when they get to the competition, will know those tunes. It is a bit of a gamble, but if you're in a nice big branch, often it's easier to find those musicians in advance that can play with you. Hi, Owen.
So if you had a newly composed tune, would you have to compose it yourself, or would somebody else compose it for you?
So with the newly composed tunes, there's a separate competition for that as well. With that competition, anyone can enter a newly composed tune. I guess it depends on who's written it, how you enter it. So some people like to enter their tunes but have other people play them for them, so they're not confident or a bit anxious to play it, which is absolutely fine if you find someone else who will learn it and play it for you. But I think it's still entered under the person that wrote the tune. So say if you're playing a tune for a friend, it would still be for them, rather than for whoever's performing it, because it's the tune that's being assessed. But if you have someone who's written a tune and they don't mind you saying you wrote it, then that's absolutely fine too. You can enter it that way and play it for them and hopefully win, take home the glory for that. I have mentioned just here on this slide with regards to newly composed music, some people do ask, can they play their own tunes in the solo competitions? That's kind of a difficult question. What I would say is often adjudicators aren't going to know every tune in the world, and they're not going to know sometimes if it's a new tune or not. And it depends on the style of tune you've written. I would say if you've written a tune and it's written in a traditional style, which is a kind of topic in itself, you could technically enter that as your solo competition tune, and no one would be any wiser if it's been written recently or written hundreds of years ago. But that's particular to the style of tune that you've written, as some of our more modern tunes have lots of different keys or different rhythms and might be more obviously newly written. And the rules do say for the Fleadh that you do need to choose traditionally based or traditional style tunes, and it could end up that you get penalised if you're playing anything that's not seen as traditional. That is a little bit difficult in itself as well. As obviously we all like different styles of music, but just specific to the Fleadh, if you are worried about placing in a competition or qualifying, it's best to choose traditional tunes. Better to be safe than sorry with that. And you can then play your other style music wherever you want, in groups or in sessions or gigs that you might be doing. Maybe save them for then. But if you're not bothered about the competition and just entering for fun or to showcase your own style of music, play whatever you want. That's absolutely fine. Just looking at this list here, so a few general tips and tricks that we thought of when thinking of the Fleadh. For those who don't know, generally tunes are played twice, and the rules do say any double tunes, which is tunes that have parts that are repeated, so first part twice, second part twice. You play the tune twice through. You won't be marked on any extra turns of the tune. So if you played it 3 or 4 times, you're not going to get extra marks for that. They'll only mark you for the first 2 times that you play it. If it's a single tune, so one part, no repeats of those, you can play it 3 times, and you probably should play it 3 times. You can play tunes with more than 2 parts, and a lot of people do go for tunes, or at least one of their tunes that maybe would have 3 or 4 parts. There's no rule with that at all. When I was competing, a lot of us were playing quite long tunes. Some of them would be 6 parts. I think we all thought it might give us more opportunity to show a variation or an ornamentation. But I do feel in the last 10 years that kind of trend we've come away from that. It's kind of stopped. It's probably for the better, because in a shorter tune you can still showcase usually the same amount of ornamentation or style, or enhance the tune enough without needing to play something extremely long. And it's more nerve-wracking playing tunes that are very long. But really, just pick tunes that you enjoy playing, and generally play your best piece last if you can. Again, I've mentioned here, jigs and reels are most common. It's just for those that it would be unusual for someone to turn up and play maybe a mazurka and a fling, and it would be really hard to compare that competitor to someone playing a jig and a reel, just because jigs and reels are our bread and butter in traditional Irish music, and those are kind of the tunes that we play best and have a bigger repertoire of. So do try and have a think of tunes that fall into those categories. And I've put at the bottom, showcase a variety of keys and rhythms. So you don't want to pick 3 tunes that are very similar in rhythm. So you wouldn't want to be doing a jig with a slip jig and a slide, because all of those have very similar rhythms. You do want to make sure that you're choosing well to show that you can play different rhythms and play them properly. And I've put major and minor tunes. Again, that's not a rule at all. You could play 3 tunes in D major if you wanted, but I quite enjoyed trying to play different keys, especially if you're on an instrument that can play easily in other keys. So I know it's not as easy on the flute, but say a fiddle or a box, you could have a G minor tune, an A major tune. You're showcasing different skills by playing tunes that are in different keys. And it's also kind of a nicer generalized performance. So it's nicer on the ear for the audience members, but also the adjudicator. And you do, I'm sure it's not specific on the mark sheet, but the overall performance and the enjoyment of your playing to the adjudicator will definitely come into play when they're marking. Yeah, I think that's everything. Did anyone have anything to add there, or any other tips and tricks for the Fleadh? No. So specifically with dance tunes, I'm just calling them dance tunes because reels, jigs, slides, polkas are upbeat music. It's not called dance tunes in the Fleadh itself. It's just the solo competitions and then the slow airs. But if we call them dance tunes, it helps to separate them a little bit. It's difficult to pick tunes for the competitions. I do appreciate that. It was hard for all of us when we were entering as well. And you do want to pick tunes that you play well, but also that you can do something with to enhance and show things like variations that you can do, or ornamentation based on your instrument. There are marks for all those things. What I used to do was listen to CDs. I didn't really have, when I was doing Fleadhs, there wasn't Spotify, or, well, there was YouTube, but hardly anything as good as there is now on it. So I was listening to tapes, albums, CDs, and not just for flute players. So I'm a flute and tin whistle player, but I listened a lot to fiddle players and concertina players. And I think it's important to listen to other instruments. If you're listening solely to the instrument you play, you can fall into kind of a trap of playing exactly like someone else, or playing too closely to their style, not really developing your own. And I feel listening to whistle players for my flute playing, and fiddle players and concertina players, there's only a certain number of ways to really play, but it does definitely give you a different style, and helps you to add different turns to the tune, and maybe things that other people wouldn't, maybe accentuating different parts of the tune and accentuating different notes. So I feel it's important to listen to other instruments rather than just the instrument that you play. Books wise, there's multiple books out there now, and there's a lot of people who have written newly composed tunes, like I said before, but there are some great books out there if you did want tunes that aren't commonly played. So Paddy O'Brien, brilliant box player from Nina in Tipperary. He's got a great repertoire of tunes that he's written. So has Josephine Keegan, Joe Liddy, Sean Ryan. There's loads. But the two kind of standard for definitely traditional tunes would probably be O'Neill's book, over 1,000 tunes in that, and Ireland's Best Session Tunes. They're just some examples. Most people will turn to online resources these days, which I totally understand. YouTube is great now, and it also has a great collection of albums on there, but also live recordings, so you can see how people are playing and not just hear. And sometimes it's easier when you're learning to watch someone play and see how they bend the notes, or things on fiddles, like how they add certain cuts or ornamentations, or how they bow. It can be really important to have that visualization as well for helping you to perfect your playing. Spotify is great. I don't use that too much myself at the moment, but a great repertoire of albums and recordings on there. And then you have the ITMA website, which is particularly good for older recordings, and even has some older recordings from Ceilidh bands that used to enter the Fleadh, and duets and trios and things from many moons ago, which is really interesting to hear. And they are playing similar stuff to what we do now, which is nice to hear. And then Cultus Live, if you haven't heard of it, is a really good website that has, I think, a video every single day. There might be an odd day where he doesn't upload, but a man named Willie Fogarty has been recording musicians at the Fleadhs for years and uploading clips from Fleadh Ceol events, from the competitions themselves. So you can see actual people playing in the competitions if you wanted on that website. See how they sit, see how they play, see what kind of styles they play. And he's got a great repertoire of music on that website from down the years. So I would definitely look into that, and it will help with your tune selection. I got quite a few of my tune choices from chatting to teachers at specific instrument workshops, so flute workshops in Ireland or at Scoilachas, or my music lessons in London. And even just in sessions, or if you're watching a concert or a gig and you hear a tune that you really like, take out your phone and record it. You can always source where that tune came from, find out if it's traditional or in the right kind of style for the Fleadh if you want to play it there. And by all means, use those tunes. Slow airs, it's slightly different. With slow airs, I would strongly advise, and this is after many years of competing and not knowing about this, but as I got older, I was advised by many people in Ireland particularly that the way to do well, or to kind of perform well in the slow air competition, is to listen to songs and to listen to singers. I started off probably listening to instrument players playing slow airs and learning airs from people playing airs, rather than listening to singers and taking the air from them. And it really does help. And I've listed a few singers there that are brilliant Shano singers that have songs in the traditional style that are accepted for Fleadh competitions. Any one of them, or any other of the amazing singers out there, you could listen to and take their version of songs from. And it really helps, particularly on things like flute and whistle, with phrasing. Singers playing the flute and the whistle is a bit like singing, so you've got breath control, and you can change kind of dynamics with your breath, where the tune or melody gets louder and quieter based on kind of the emotion in the song itself. But also it changes the phrasing when you take your breath, and that's probably what I gained most from listening to singers, is kind of how to phrase sections. And I remember once playing an air in a competition, and the adjudicator said to me, "You don't know the song." And I was thinking, how do you know I don't know the song? And they said, because where I was taking a breath was in the middle of a word. And most of these songs are in Irish. And yeah, so I wasn't aware I was even breathing in a place that could be incorrect in that air. So that was really interesting and helped me going forward. I can't actually remember, and I should have looked this up, but you do need to have quite a number of airs prepared for the air competition. And I forgot to look into that before this, but particularly for senior, I had to have 8 slow airs ready. And I've not entered the Fleadh in over 10 years, so this may well have changed, but I had to have 8 prepared, and I think we played 3 or 4 of them. And sometimes the adjudicator lets you pick one and then they pick the others, or they might let you pick a couple. It depends on who the adjudicator is. But they often will pick from your list the song that they know. And so it's important to know the songs of the airs that you're playing. There are a few airs that don't have actual words, and so those are probably a little bit easier. You can't get penalised for anything like breathing in the middle of a word. But it is a really interesting competition. I've always found it really difficult to call who's doing well in that competition. But to set you apart from other people, I would say learn from singers. Do add dynamics to your music. So you don't want to be going up and down all the time with getting louder and quieter at random intervals. But it is important to kind of go with the feel of the tune, go with the emotion of the tune. If a part of the tune sounds sad or dark, then you could be playing that to reflect that. So maybe a little bit quieter and then coming up louder to where the tune opens up again and is happier. You can bend notes, so you've got more time in slow airs, the tune is slower. You can add slide up to certain notes, or I call it bending notes on flutes and the tin whistle, but you can do that from above or below the note. That's something to discuss with your teachers, and I know it's specific to instruments, but you can add those different kind of feelings to the tune by doing that. And vibrato, which I think would be more for, again, flutes, whistles and fiddles. Fiddles can do great vibrato, and that can be really effective in a slow air, and you probably wouldn't have time to do vibrato in a reel or a jig, maybe except the very end note. So it's a nice competition to sit back, kind of enjoy the emotion of the tune and showcase different skills that you wouldn't have shown in the dance tune competition. I think that's everything for slow airs. If I do find out exactly how many you need now for each competition, we can send that information out to you. I just remembered there, as I was saying it, having to prepare far more than was actually needed for the competition, which, again, if you don't know, that can be quite daunting to arrive with your 4 tunes and be told you needed 8, and you have to have them written out to hand to the adjudicator so that they can select which ones they want you to play. So if anyone on the chat already knows how many, please jump in.
I've just pulled the Fleadh rules up while you were
great.
chatting there. So for under 12s, you play 1 air and you have to have a list of 2. For 12 to 15, you need 4 airs and you'll play 2. For under 18, you need 6 and you'll play 2. And for seniors or over 18s, you need 8 and you'll play 2.
Right, okay. So I'm not sure if that's slightly changed in terms of how many you play or not, but that's good. So you only have to play 2, but you have to have 8 ready, which, yeah, and it could be any of the 2 you're asked to play. From memory, I do think they do mostly let you choose one of them, so you can have a favourite and hopefully get to play that one. But thank you. Mairi, did you have any information about the singing competitions?
Yeah, I thought we'd do this a little bit as more of a Q&A, but I'll give a bit of a spiel first anyway. So for those who don't know much about the traditional singing competitions, they're split by gender, and they're also split by language, in addition to the normal age group, which is different than most of the other competitions. I've only ever entered in English, but the Irish rules are all very much the same. So for under 12s, you prepare 2 songs, one slow and one lively, and you sing them both. For 12 to 15 and for 15 to 18, you submit 4 songs, so 2 slow and 2 lively, and normally the adjudicator will pick the first one, and you pick the kind of contrasting one. So if the adjudicator picks a slow song, then you'll pick a fast one to sing. And for seniors over 18s, you submit a list of 6, so 4 slow songs and 2 lively ones. And again, the adjudicator will pick one and you will pick the contrasting one. Just some kind of general notes on picking songs and what to be looking for. If you're looking at kind of the younger, I know there were a couple of questions about teaching and what you might consider. So for younger or kind of more beginner singers, regardless of age, you want to be thinking about songs that are quite simple in structure And what I mean by that is that they'd be quite easy to break down. There'd be kind of repetition in the melody, repetition in the phrases, and tend to be a little bit shorter as well. So the verses will be shorter, but the actual number of verses as well could be, just makes it easier to remember. They also kind of tied into that, some of the more beginner ones will have a chorus, which is a nice way for you to kind of catch your breath almost and remember where you are and ground yourself if you're stressed about being in the competition. And then as you move through and get more confident, you can kind of pick more themes and storylines that are a bit more difficult or a bit more emotive to convey. They can get a bit longer. Sometimes they'll require kind of bigger vocal range, so you go lower and go higher to show off what you can do with your voice. And you might start to add in some more kind of detailed ornamentation to try and improve your expression of the story, because the important thing in the singing competitions is that you're not just kind of playing a tune or singing a tune for the sake of it sounding nice. You're trying to convey the story and what was going on at that time across the way Orla was saying with your slow airs. You want to understand what's being said and the story behind it and what it really means to be able to showcase it properly. In terms of how you would get songs, I suppose it varies depending on whether you're coming from an area where there's lots of singers and there's a really strong singing tradition, or whether you don't really know of anyone around you. For me personally, I learned a lot through things like the cultist workshops. I would have done Scoileagship when I was younger and met a lot of incredible singers. But if you're not lucky enough to be able to make your way across to those kind of workshops or have people in the branches close to you who would be able to advise, there are some great resources online. Cultist has a traditional singing or teaching traditional singing guidelines booklet, which is amazing. It kind of gives you suggestions for what to look out for when you're teaching, song suggestions for different age group, for different experience levels rather, and how to go about like approaching going through the songs. In terms of getting them, I would suggest Itma and Cultist Live and things like that Orla said, but also YouTube was a huge resource for me. But you have to be a little bit strategic in how you do it, because there's a lot of Irish songs that wouldn't be considered traditional or Sean Noss for the competitions. So my strategy tended to be, if I found a singer that I really liked the style of, then I would go on and Google them and see if there were any recordings or YouTube videos or anything like that of songs that they were singing, to try and get an understanding of the style. If you've found a song that you love that you want to do, then you can obviously be looking them up. But yeah, you need to be a little bit more careful with the singing about the style and also about the type. So the way Orla was saying that we have dance tunes and slow airs for the instrument competitions, we've got lively and slow songs in the singing competition. Lively doesn't mean fast, and that's where a lot of people trip up. Lively means that your song has a beat. So if you can tap your foot along to it, then that song is lively regardless of the speed you're singing it. And a slow song should be like a slow air, so there should be no beats or pulse going through it. It should be quite free. I think that's my kind of spiel. I know there's always a lot of questions, so I will kind of just leave this open to the floor for a minute.
Right. Well, if anyone does, if you don't want to be asking questions live on this workshop today, that's absolutely fine. Hopefully, we'll send some. Maybe there's an email address that we can pop into the chat that you can send some questions to after as well, if you want to, or if you think of anything as we go along, even if it's from a previous slide. Please feel free to ask. So thank you, Mairi. That was really helpful. Just a little bit about Fleadh preparation. Obviously, you do need to practice. Practice makes perfect. Practicing slow Something my mum always used to tell me, you know, start slow. You can always build up your speed and build up to kind of a tempo that you're comfortable playing at the Fleadh. You don't need to be playing really fast in the competition. The kind of speeds you might hear in a live concert or in a session can be extremely fast, and you know that's really fun to play, but you don't want to be playing to a level that's so fast that you can't show the proper tone of the instrument, the rhythm of the tune, and the kind of touches that you've added to the tune. So start slow and build up to a nice, steady, traditional pace, I guess. In terms of variations, some of you may not have heard of variations before, but you do get marks in the Fleadh competitions for kind of making the tune your own, but just subtly. So you don't want to completely change the tune, but there are ways of changing the melody line slightly that could make it either slightly enhanced or just make it slightly more interesting. And these are particularly added to the tune the second time round that you would play. So the first time you kind of leave it the way the tune is written. You can have ornamentation, which is different to variation, and I'll touch on that in a moment. But variations themselves can be a little bit daunting if you've never added them to a tune before. And often it's a good idea, if you do have a teacher or a friend that's quite confident in playing, that you maybe run by your ideas by them first to see maybe if your variation is slightly too much or if it's too subtle to be noticed. You want to change the tune just enough that the adjudicator is aware that you've remembered to add some nice changes in, that it doesn't sound really odd within the tune, so you don't want it to have changed the key of the tune suddenly or changed the rhythm, but just enhance it and maybe show off another little skill that you have. In terms of ornamentation, again, it will vary based on the instrument you're playing, but it is important to have these throughout the tune, and they're basically embellishments, again, enhancing the tune. It's very instrument specific and worth talking to your teachers about, but there are ways to add things like rolls, which are like long decorated versions of long notes in tunes, cuts, which are very short additions, before or after notes that you can add, triplets, and like we said with the solos, bending the notes. There are ways of adding these that fit tunes really well. There are also ways of adding these that can really affect and ruin the rhythm, so it's important again to have some help with that if it's totally new to you, or not something you've had experience doing before. And one thing that I always find is extremely important is timing. So yes, don't play too fast, but also play in time and consistently. So if you've started fast, you need to maintain that. So it's better to start slightly slower, but to keep that same timing throughout is really important. And more important, I would say, than remembering to add ornamentation or variation, you can play a tune beautifully if you're playing it solidly and in time, and you don't need always a load of variations or ornamentation to make it a really beautiful or effective piece of music. Things get a little bit different with your group preparation. So for things like duet competitions, which is where you're playing with two people, trios, which is where you've got three, and then you've got ceilidh bands, and you've got your groupie kills. Just specifically with the duets, trios and ceilidh bands, you have different criteria and different things that are expected of you. So you are expected to start and finish together, and that's meant to be quite synchronized. So it's not very relaxed. You will get marks for starting exactly on the beat together and finishing generally together. So that's important to practice. Some people choose to count out loud to each other. So they might say 1, 1, 2, and that's the signal for them to start and signal to start together. Some people prefer to do it with a foot tap. There are different ways of doing it, but as long as you start together, that's the important thing. In the ceilidh band, it's a little bit easier because you're allowed to use either the drum, which would signal the start of the tune by tapping, or the piano, which vamps a few chords to signal the start, and everyone should start at the same time. And often bands and duets and trios will spend a lot of time just perfecting the starts and finishes of their tunes to make sure they're synchronized. So that's important to note because that's totally separate to the solo competitions. Again, you need to be consistent with your tempo. As a group, you should all be playing together, so synchronized in a way, and it shouldn't be speeding up or slowing down, and you should all be playing tightly, is how I would say. Again, you do score some marks with adding some variations. You should all be playing the exact same variations, note for note, if possible. And in that way, it's important to think about the instruments that you're using and how the tunes work on those instruments. So, for instance, if you are a duet with a flute and a fiddle player, if your tune goes below the note D, it's quite difficult. Well, most flutes don't go below D. You can go maybe one note below. But it might be worth thinking of a different tune that doesn't go below D, so that the flute and fiddle can play more synchronized. And yeah, you can maybe make more flute-friendly variations rather than it being just suited to one of the instruments. You also need to think about the blend of your instruments. So if you have a pipe player and a very timid fiddle player, you don't want the pipes to be dominant in that duet or in that group competition. In the same way, you don't want the fiddle to be overpowered, or it could be the other way around. So you need to think about the blend of your instruments. Some people do consider seating position. They might sit further forward, closer to the adjudicator if their instrument is quieter, and if they're louder, sit further back. I'm not sure how effective that is, but it's definitely something you can do. And if you feel like you need all the help you can get with blend, then by all means do that. Also, some eye contact can be good. It can help you all with your nerves if you're all kind of looking at each other whilst you're playing, smiling at each other, enjoy the performance, and just try and relax with it. And if anything happens or there's mistakes, just carry on. It doesn't matter. It's not the end of the world. Everyone makes the mistakes. So let me just see here. I've just made a note here. Some people do like to signal to each other when variations are coming up. That's okay, I would say, if it's subtle, but don't be really obvious with it. Just do that subtly, and the variation should kind of just be something subtle that enhances the tune, or is obvious enough for us to recognise that you've thrown one in, but nothing too out there. Did anyone want to add anything there about tips for preparing for either of those competitions? I'm just thinking, is there anything else specific to groups that you would need to know? I would just say definitely for groups, don't pick an air, because the airs are too free-flowing. Always pick tunes with a beat, and that might sound silly, but they are still listed as tunes you're allowed to play for those group competitions. I have heard one duet do a slow air once at the All Britain, and it was actually really nice, but again, they couldn't do very much of it, so I don't think it did very well in that competition, and it's just not standard, so I would say avoid anything without a beat, particularly for those group competitions. In terms of adjudication, so I haven't adjudicated at very high levels as such, but obviously we've all had adjudication sheets. We can see what the kind of criteria are. I've done some small level FLAs, and adjudication is actually really, really difficult. So it's kind of useful to have the criteria so that you can try and separate people. And I guess my point with that is it often comes down to really minor things when you're trying to separate between different competitors, because everyone's normally very, very good, very well practiced, playing really nice tunes. They've got ornamentation, they've got variation, and it will come down to things like their control of the instrument, or kind of the adjudicator's preference over the styles. So from the adjudication sheets themselves that I've seen, I hope it's not changed recently, because I haven't been to a FLA recently, but it typically was scored out of 100 marks. 50 marks were awarded for style and ornamentation. I would say that's particularly just how you're playing the tune, if it's in time, if you're playing the rhythm right, and if you're adding suitable and kind of enjoyable rolls, cuts and embellishments. And that's the main bulk of the score, so that's a good 50% of the marks going towards that. I would say it's basically, are you able to play the tune in a traditional style but also kind of keep it your own? You score an additional 10 marks for playing consistent timing. So that's kind of how well you're able to control your rhythm and timing. And it also probably would incorporate your speed. So if you're playing way too slow, jigs can't be played too slow, or reels can't be played too slow that they're not, they're almost unrecognisable as jigs or reels, but at the same time they can't be played too fast. You get 10 marks for rhythm. I would say that's mostly to do with, can you play the different tunes that you've selected, can you play those rhythms correctly? So you can play hornpipes that sound like reels, and then that's going to drop you marks down, or marches that aren't played in the correct rhythm, or so that is basically the same for all the different categories. You need to have heard those tunes, played them regularly, and maybe played them to someone to make sure that they recognise the type of tune that you're playing. Then you get 15 marks for tone and variations, so they've combined those. So variations, we've said, subtle enhancements to the tune, and it's your chance to show maybe a bit of your personality or your style, and then the tone, so how well the instrument actually sounds. So with this, I would say make sure you're in tune, particularly if you play an instrument that can easily go out of tune before you go up. You can tune a little bit when you're sat in the chair, but no adjudicator or audience member wants to be sat there while you're tuning for 5 minutes up there waiting to start. So do try and have tuned up before you enter the room, and then maybe a few seconds tuning before you start again. And also, I guess with tone, it's things like you don't want to squeak. You want to make sure you're getting the best sound out of the instrument. If you do have little squeaks or squawks here and there, which we all do, it's fine. But if it was happening regularly, I assume from that mark section that might be where they can adjust some of your marks and decide between really close competitors. So yeah, my advice would be make sure you're well warmed up before you go in, tuned up, and that you're confident with your tune and you have a structure with it. I do know people that add variations on the day. They're very brave. I wouldn't be able to do that. They kind of just add whatever comes to them. You can do that by all means, but I would say it's probably better to have them prepared in advance and maybe have played them to someone to see if they think that they suit the tune and that they suit the instrument as well. On the day itself, so a little bit about Fleadh etiquette, as we do have some people here today who've never been into a Fleadh, and it can be quite daunting on the first day that you step foot into the Fleadh and the competition, knowing what to expect. What I would say is that usually when you arrive, and everyone feel free to jump in because I haven't done this in a while, but there would be 2 people, sometimes 3, sat at a table in a room. One of them is usually the ward clerk, so that person is mainly sat there to kind of ensure that the competition runs in order, that all the competitors are called, everyone gets an opportunity to play. They also hopefully want you to play in that order, in that running order, to keep it fair. And normally they're sat on the edge, and you either have 1 or 2 adjudicators sat beside them, and it's only them 2 who'll be scoring your tune playing and marking you. When the ward clerk calls your name, you can then step forward, and there'll be a seat in front of their table facing them normally. Depends again on the type of room you're in. Most of the time it's like a classroom. Your chair faces the adjudicators and the audience are behind you, which can suit a lot of people. If you're on stage, it can be very different. That tends to happen more at the kind of higher level Fleadhs, like the All Ireland. You could be sat on a stage with the adjudicators below you and the audience all out in front as well. So that can be daunting, but something to be aware of could happen. So you sit in front of the adjudicator. You're not facing the audience often, but again, like I've said, it depends on the room. And you then, it sounds strange, but you usually wait to get like a little nod from the adjudicator to start. And that's often because they're making notes or still writing their marks for the previous competitor. I guess if you're the first one up, they'll just say, whenever you're ready, or something along those lines. And then you start playing your first piece. You can bring some water up with you. It's not usually provided, so I'd bring a bottle of water. And you can bring that up and set it by your seat while you're playing. You play your first tune, and in between each piece, again, you have to give the adjudicator some time to make their notes, and they'll again tell you when you can start the next piece. People normally come in and out of the room during the competition. It could be parents of competitors in the competition, could be people just coming in to listen. Normally they try and stop people coming in during a singular performance. So if, say, you have 3 tunes to play, normally someone will be standing by the door to stop people coming in until the end of that 3rd tune. But sometimes if there's a lot of traffic in and out of that room for whatever reason, they could be coming in and out between your pieces. So whilst the clapping is happening after your first piece, that door could be opening and shutting. So that's something to be aware of if that might throw you off. Once you finish your final tune, you relax, head back to your seat in the audience. Some people like to stay and listen to other competitors, which can be nice, and you could be supporting friends in the competition or just having a listen to kind of the standard. And it can be quite enjoyable to listen to other competitors. But if you don't want to, or nervous or whatever, you can just leave the room at that point and come back whenever you want. It doesn't matter. So you're done at that point. Do your best to be on time when you're called. It's quite good Fleadh etiquette to be on time for your competition and to play in the order that the names are written. If you are in more than one competition, you should, I think you go to the Fleadh office early in the morning, or you used to, and you can get like a little, it's like a little card that allows you to play out of order in one of your competitions, because obviously you can't be in 2 places at once, and sometimes competitions do clash, but that's something you'd need to prepare for in advance. And you do get Fleadh timetables for most of the Fleadhs in advance of the competition, so you can kind of work out if you're going to have a clash. You don't tend to get the running order, at least for the regional Fleadhs I've been to. I can't remember for the All Britain, I don't think so. I think it's just the All Ireland that you get a running order. Am I right there?
It'll be in the Fleadh programme, which you get on the day.
Do you get that for the All Britain?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if I had that one back in my day, but so fine. For the All Britain, you will have a running order. You'll know roughly when you're meant to be playing. And yeah, kind of dependent on the number of tunes each competitor is supposed to play, you can kind of guess roughly how long into the competition it will be before you're needed to be there. But yeah, for the most part, it's good to play in the order that's been laid out by the Fleadh programme. And like I said before, just about the tuning, I would try and tune up before you arrive in, and not be spending loads and loads of time up in front of the adjudicator tuning. Just a quick short retune in between performances or just before you start to play. It's also important just to have fun with it all. It is really daunting, and it feels sometimes quite sterile to be going into a room. It's a quiet room, you're going and playing on your own, it can be quite difficult, but you can also enjoy it. The adjudicators want you to do well. They want the competitors to have fun with it, and they're enjoying the music that they're hearing that day, and so are the people in the audience. So everyone's with you, and everyone gets nervous. So that's absolutely normal, and not to be worried about that if you are suffering with anything like that. With regards to the next stages, if you are lucky enough to get placed and you've come first or second, you're qualified to the next round, which is, if you start at the regional level, you'll be playing at the All Britain. 3rd place can be recommended from what I've read in the rules. That rule kind of changes every so often, but at the moment it seems like if the adjudicator feels that the top 3 were good enough for the next round, so the next Fleadh level, the All Britain or the All Ireland, that they can recommend them as well going forward. But if you're first or second, you're guaranteed through. Let's see. Yeah, okay. So that's the end of the slides. But even though we've kind of been quite heavy on the competition side of the Fleadhs, it's also important to know that the Fleadh weekend itself, particularly the All Britain and the All Ireland, are really brilliant events for anyone interested in traditional Irish music. You can go to them even if you haven't entered the Fleadh. So if you haven't entered to play in a competition, you can still attend the Fleadh to listen to the competitions. You do have to pay something on the day, a small fee, just to enter the competitions, as in to enter to listen. I can't remember what that fee is, and you get a little wristband, and that gives you access to kind of go around to the different competitions you want to and listen to the standards. There's also loads of sessions that go on, and they are free for everyone to join. So if you just wanted to go along meet some new people, meet some people interested in Irish music or song or dance, or join in and play a few tunes or learn some tunes, then you're more than welcome to do that, and you can do that without entering into any competition. The All Britain in particular is a brilliant weekend, and always has been, and I think it's probably getting better as the years go on. This year it's at the end of June, and if you just want to go along and experience what the Fleadh is like, I would recommend that you go to that. The All Ireland is also worth going to, but it's a week long. It's a huge festival. It's become a huge event now. It has gigs, performances, stages, gig rigs, festival clubs all through the week. It can be quite difficult to get accommodation, so if you are thinking of going somewhere, going to an All Ireland, which this year is in Wexford, you'd need to be thinking of that now, or maybe even last summer, to try and get accommodation for that. So do have a think about that if you are interested in going, but it should be fine still for the All Britain in June if you're interested in that. Is there any questions in the chat, guys? Because I can't see.
There's nothing in the chat, but I think we've answered quite a lot of questions, to be perfectly honest. There's been some really, really good questions coming through.
Right, perfect.
Yeah, so we're only 6 minutes over. Thank you so much, Ola, for everything.
No,
thank you for everybody for coming. Yeah, so if anybody has got any more questions, we'll end the talk here, and you can go back to your Saturday and enjoy whatever you're doing.